probably heard of this manga, I Think I Turned My Childhood Friend Into a Girl, because it was at the center of a controversy years ago where EN localizers changed the femboy main character into a trans woman. This was so egregious that the intellectual property holder in Japan found out about it, forced the publishing company 7Seas to fix the intentional, malicious alteration, I should say. Nevertheless, they had 7Seas fix this and reprint the entire thing. This got even more attention because infamous localizer Katrina Leonidakis also, and that name's a mouthful, excuse me, but she also showed public support for the corrupt localization of this series, which, as mentioned, got even more attention. This account, Sky, posting a screenshot of what Katrina said. It's been a while since I read this. Let's get a quick refresher. I know the translator, and they've done their homework on this series, reading future volumes, consulting with trans people, and working hard to make sure it's as accurate as possible. Shame on those listening to one rando and trashing it. I fully support this translator. It's impressive how terrible that post is. Like, I consulted with trans people for a femboy character. That doesn't even make sense. And then saying that they tried to make it as accurate as possible, as they literally went out of their way to make it not accurate and to be manipulative about all of this. And then saying shame on them listening to one rando. It wasn't one rando. There was a ton of people calling this out, including, like I said, the literal IP holder and creator. Which takes us to the news, as this series has been officially announced to be receiving a TV anime. And already we're seeing reactionary trans activists online trying to claim that the main character is trans once again. How original. Which people instantly predicted, of course. For example, comments like, I can already see the Western trans mob coming to try and forcefully erase any gay and femboy character in this and call them trans. I hope this doesn't happen and that fans of this can be left to peacefully enjoy this. Yeah, so that already did happen, with the manga. And like I said, it's also happening with the anime because of this announcement. For example, this Twitter influencer with like 330,000 followers on Twitter and claiming to be a 33-year-old trans person. Oh, and also a communist because, gotta be as generic as possible. Well, they respond to the news and say, another trans head gem. We've been eating good. Yeah, sure, I guess if you've been eating delusions. And by the way, I redacted this person's username because these sort of accounts, they're so desperate for attention. So yeah, we're not going to give them that, but we will keep taking a look at some more of their posts because the delusions get even worse. As this user responds to the OP and says, this was definitely proven not to be one. Go find your trans head gems elsewhere. Showing the official 7Seas announcement that we talked about earlier, where the creator had to correct this stuff. But the OP isn't having it. Says means nothing, LMAO. Oh yeah, the creator's own word means nothing, right? Like I said, peak delusions. They're coping so hard that even other trans people are calling them out, writing, okay, as a trans woman, this one is 100% not. It's just a femboy, honestly. And another saying, is it really a trans series? I don't think I'm caught up on the manga, but I thought they were just going with the Otokonoko angle. The OP says, you mean the trans het angle? Yes. The OP continued to get called out, making really bad responses that don't address anything at all, and then ultimately even denies that femboys have been getting erased, and how in this context with this manga, erasing the femboy also erased gay representation. But the OP denies all of this stuff, which is especially hilarious because, again, the literal series that they're commenting on had all of this occur in the localization. They erased the gay rep, they erased the femboy rep, and they made all that trans rep instead. But hey, yeah, this isn't really happening. This user going on to further call out the OP in their final post here. The OP never responded to this one, and they end by saying, just because you're loud about your identity doesn't mean you get to undermine anyone. They also called out the egg cracking part of the trans community, which is just overt grooming. We've talked about that before. It's when they go to people and say, oh, you're trans, you just don't know it yet, and then they literally try to shove you that direction. The account Femboy Ideas would post 2 screenshots of other trans people unhappy with this news of this series getting an anime, saying, genuinely, I'm always incredibly suspicious of these kind of shows. It just looked like fetishism to me. Oh yeah, because, being trans is valid and good, but just being a femboy, that's not valid, that's fetishism. And this screenshot that says, sad that the manga clearly points out it's a femboy, but not a trans girl. But oh well, what can you do? Well, at least that second person is leaving it there and not trying to erase the femboy like others have. Though it's sad the bar is that low. Here's another one. This user responds to the news, to the announcement, and says, oh no, Let me guess, Crunchyroll will make the guy trans in the subtitles or dub. This person says, as they should. And unsurprisingly, over on Reddit, some reactionaries are still trying to push trans labels on this series. For example, in this post about the news from our anime, this user says, I could be watching this just because that name really makes me curious, not gonna lie. And this user says, it's not true gender bending, it's a grounded, semi-accidental, semi-intentional, egg-breaking tale. Except, like we've already discussed, there is no egg breaking here. Egg breaking is specifically when these people try and force people to be trans. It is grooming. That's not what's going on in this show. He's just cross-dressing, and the main character's practicing his makeup skills on his friend. But these people, man, they literally view everything from a lens of that has to be trans, that has to be trans, that one's trans adjacent, that one's trans coded. Could you imagine living life like that where you have a single personality trait and that's it? That everything must be trans, everything's trans. Like, dude, holy smokes, how dull. And it's really funny how these sort of people love to accuse others of having no media literacy. And it's like, dude, look in a mirror. These people really do have no media literacy at all. Absolutely zero. And so this comment that claims that the series involves semi-intentional egg breaking, which again is just overt misinformation, still gets 280 upvotes, becoming one of the most upvoted comments in the entire post. However, a few other users did call them out. For example, right here, this one says, that is exactly the topic of the mess that happened 4 years ago when the official translation of the manga came out. Getting a response from another user that reads, yep, I remember that. Can't believe it was 4 years ago. The MC just enjoyed cross-dressing, but didn't identify as a girl if I recall correctly. Did the manga change it later, or does the MC stay the same as just a guy who enjoys cross-dressing? Another response saying, still the same, so I don't get why the comment calling it egg breaking got so many upvotes. MC is a gay femboy that enjoys cross-dressing. Not trans. Nothing more, nothing less. As for the misinformation getting so many upvotes and being one of the most upvoted comments in the post, well, you know, over on Reddit, as long as you're spreading the right message and the right agenda, even if it's overt misinformation, you'll get upvoted. That's how Reddit is. Another user calls this out though, saying it's the sort of contradiction that the trans community has been refusing to acknowledge. They will use the very stereotypes they fight against to justify calling someone trans. This person tries to defend the behavior, or rather deflect from it, I should say, by essentially making the argument that it's not the entire community. And, you know, they kind of say that in a giant wall of text, getting a response that says, well, yeah, obviously not all, etc., but it's not exactly uncommon to see it online, especially with media. And that's exactly the thing. There is a huge part of the trans community that pushes the egg stuff. And like I've mentioned before, there are some trans people that call it out, but they're always a minority in comparison to those that do push that rhetoric on others. Anyways, I'm kind of running out of time here. That's why I'm rushing the end. I gotta go. I haven't made an 8-minute video in a while. But hey, at least we hit the 8-minute mark, so that's cool. I'll leave it there though. Let me know what you think about the latest. That is essentially the situation, more or less. Also, have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one.